Approximately 30 years ago, the United Nations implemented something called Agenda 21, which is essentially their master plan for humanity, the agenda for the 21st century. And this 100-year-long agenda of theirs, it's broken down into shorter 15-year-long segments. The first 15-year plan was called Agenda 2015, or the Millennium Development Goals. And then currently, we are living in the second 15-year plan, the so-called Agenda 2030, which, at least according to UN documents, is the agenda to transform our world for quote-unquote sustainable development. And unbeknownst to many, many people, for the past 10 or so odd years now, this broad agenda from the United Nations has been trickling down and getting implemented as concrete policies right here in America. And so using things like the Endangered Species Act, WOTUS, the Waters of the U.S. Act, the Antiquities Act, as well as quite literally billions of dollars in federal money to either buy up land or to convince landowners to place conservation easements on their land, so it's technically still private, but you're just not allowed to develop it. Using all these different methods, the government has been taking land out of production in order to supposedly, well, save the planet. This is all part of the Biden administration's broad plan to place 30% of America's land and put it completely out of production by the year 2030. This would mean that 30% of the land would be placed into federal conservation, and it would essentially be idled. There would be no grazing, there would be no farming, no drilling, there would be no fishing, no developing, basically just no human involvement. And while the current aim is to take 30% of America's land by the year 2030, once that's actually achieved, well, the next step will be to take 50% of America's land by the year 2050. It's sort of a rolling project with the ultimate goal being for the federal government to own a majority of the land in America and to make that land inaccessible to the people in order to, again, save the planet. And while the people who live in the cities, in the urban centers, they don't really feel the effects of these policies in a visceral way, well, the people who live in the countryside, they do. They feel the encroachment of this federal government agenda on a daily basis. And so, while I was down in Texas, I took the opportunity to sit down and speak with Mr. Loren Patterson. He is a cattle rancher as well as the president of the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association. And he broke down for us the very specific methods that the government has been using to lock up America's land, the corollary devastating effects that that is having on the ranchers, and how ultimately this will all lead to the erosion of American freedom. And so, take a super quick moment to smash those like and subscribe buttons and take a listen. Loren, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So can you sort of give us a picture of New Mexico's cattle situation? Is it like predominantly big businesses, or is it small family-owned ranches? Can you sort of...
It's predominantly small family-run business operations, so where the family is the main labor source. They're the management source, but they sweep up too. So, we do have some of the largest ranches. They're not really conglomerates, they're family ranches, but they're acreage-wise, they're some of the largest in the nation. Cattle number-wise, they're some of the largest in the nation. But predominantly, it's a family atmosphere in our industry. But agriculture bounces between the second and third largest industry in our state. And livestock production is the largest part of the ag industry.
So, you're here at the Stop 30 by 30 Summit, and I know that over in New Mexico, 35%, close to 35% of the land is owned federally, 50% of the land is owned privately, and with, I guess, the missing chunk, I guess, state and local government would own that. What's the situation in terms of Agenda 30 by 30 in New Mexico?
So it's been a very rampant problem for New Mexico agriculture, and I say agriculture because there's multiple phases, not just the livestock industry that rely on that land. New Mexico is largely marginal land. It's not suited for a plow. It doesn't have irrigation, so grazing it is the best use. Grazing, recreation. But recreation and grazing can go hand in hand. So some of the 30 by 30 stuff is actually trying to take the grazing out as a multi-use purpose. And what we see is our tax base is being depleted in our rural communities because you take the cattle away, you take the tax away.
How's the government doing it? Are they just coming in and just buying up lots that are for sale?
Both. They're doing it they've passed the Land of Enchantment Fund, which is going to give them quite a bit of money to purchase rural properties, put them in conservation easements, those type of things. But then also the administrative state, we're seeing more and more regulation. Our animal numbers continue to go down and down, what we're allowed, permitted to operate on those lands. So, and then also in New Mexico, we're a high desert state, and water's life. And if you don't have the water, you don't have the life. So even for our livestock industry, we're not, as we see our water being taken away from us and taken to the urban areas or even just conserved, we lose that opportunity to operate on those lands.
I can imagine. The Land of Enchantment Fund you mentioned, can you sort of elaborate on that for someone who might have never heard of it before?
Well, so in New Mexico, it's kind of a funny situation. The number one business in New Mexico is petroleum. We have some of the highest producing Permian Basin petroleum fields in the nation. 35% of the state budget comes from those oil royalties, but they continue to push a green agenda against the oil companies.
The Land of Enchantment Fund, is that the federal funds coming to the state, and then the state is?
So it's both. The state is allocating those funds, but it also gets a federal match, whether it's through the Inflation Reduction Act or other conservation funds within. One of the ones we killed that would have put money towards it was the Recovering America's Wildlife Act. We kind of got that stopped, and that was going to put $92 million a year into New Mexico to actually buy property. And to be honest, as a rancher, as agriculture businessmen and women, we cannot outbid the federal government. When they decide to buy a piece of property, it's going to leave agriculture production.
All right, I'd like to just pause here for a super quick moment and introduce the sponsor of today's episode by showing you this little piece of money. Or rather, I should say that this is fake money being printed into oblivion by those geniuses over in Washington, D.C. And so before they completely obliterate your life savings, what I recommend you do is to convert that fake money into real money, which is physical gold and silver. And the best company to use is the sponsor of today's episode, American Hartford Gold, who also happens to be my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. They have thousands of other 5-star ratings across the country. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They ship quickly, directly to your doorstep. Their product listings are awesome. They're stacked with great options of gold and silver bullion and coins, and they have amazing customer service. When you pick up the phone and call them, you feel good knowing you support a company that supports the truth getting out into the wider American audience. And so calling them up is a no-brainer. But best of all, if you tell them that Roman sent you, they will throw in up to $5,000 worth of free silver with your first purchase. It's 866-242-2352, or you can simply text the word Roman, R-O-M-A-N, Roman, to 65532. Of course, all their details will be down in the description box below. And now, let's head on back to the studio. Which endangered species are they using predominantly in the state?
So there's one huge one, and it's been one that's been going on we've been fighting for 30 years now, and it's the Mexican gray wolf. We started out with, they were going to put out a population, and the recovery goal was 129. Well, we're looking at over 300 head of wolves now, and they will not call it a recovered species. They just keep changing the goal post. They also keep expanding the recovery zone and what's critical habitat. So now 50% of New Mexico, the southern half, is considered critical habitat for the Mexican gray wolf. And so you cannot in any way harass those animals. I have to physically see that animal attacking one of my livestock before I can do anything about it. And then when we do have a loss due to wolves, to get the federal government to allocate money for the recovery of that animal's, the economic impact to a rancher, it's almost impossible. They keep changing the standards of what is a confirmed wolf kill. Well, they only pay the confirmed ones. They don't pay the probable kills, and they don't pay for animals that the wolves just stressed to death, which is they kill for sport. And I hate to say that. I mean, but until until the ranchers are part of the recovery system for that species will never be safe. You have to bring the ranchers, the people who live in the communities, in on those recovery plans to be successful. The second one that we're really seeing a big uptick in is the lesser prairie chicken. And that would affect the eastern third of the state, and predominantly where the majority of our private land is. And so the lesser prairie chicken will drastically affect grazing permits, management of those permits. So we're going to have to manage around a species that really has had a very, very low population since the beginning of time. There just has not been a lot of lesser prairie chickens in our neck of the world, just because we don't have the water to support a wild game fowl like that. So my problem with the Endangered Species Act is very seldom do they have a baseline population to work from. They just assume that the population was better in the past. And that's not true. And of course you've heard about the meadow jumping mouse and how it affected one family. They have physically not seen that mouse yet. How can you take away somebody's livelihood when the animal's never been seen?
Yeah, that's shocking.
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, if it happened in Central Park, would they close down Central Park? Are you kidding me? No, they wouldn't. And so just to think that the government has that power to do it, and they do it not by congressional order, they're doing it through bureaucratic red tape.
That was going to be my next question. Let's say somebody lives in the eastern part of New Mexico, and they have a nice allotment of private land. They have a good amount of acres. How is their life going to be specifically affected if the lesser prairie chicken is found to be in the area?
Well, first of all, if you accidentally kill one, then suddenly you're going to be fined. You're going to be liable for the death of that animal. You're going to be fined, and you might even see jail time. And that if you intentionally kill one. If you don't admit that they're there, they're going to they're going to tax you on what you can do there, or regulate you out of what you can do there. And then of course they're already wanting us to file grazing management plans, like which pastures we'll graze, where we'll rest, where we'll stay out of the habitat, and they want you to protect that habitat even if you don't have any prairie chickens. And that's the issue. And with New Mexico, our rain is spotty at best. We work within the confines of Mother Nature, and she doesn't always rain every 15 days. She may rain every 15 months, And so we graze our lands according to Mother Nature, not according to a handbook at the Wildlife Services.
Right. And the people on that plot of land wouldn't be able to graze because of the chicken. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and so you're throwing another kink into our management and how we can best and most efficiently produce food.
Wow, that's shocking. I spoke to, actually it's funny, I didn't include it in the documentary because it was a little bit of an aside, but both in California and over in the Netherlands, wolves were a problem. They were saying that environmentalists were introducing wolves, and it was just wrecking their land. They would constantly find their animals either really scared or some of them dead every once in a while, and they would just not be able to do anything about it. So it's sort of like the situation you mentioned. Is the wolf, the wolf that's specific to your area, was that like an actual indigenous species, or was it introduced by somebody?
It was an indigenous species for years, but as the settling of the West happened, wolves became a problem. They became a nuisance animal. And so those population numbers were actually killed out by the government. They paid a bounty on wolves so that they could establish tax bases in communities. And as as time went, we nearly killed out the wolf in New Mexico by government support. And now as we bring them back in, they're not the same species. Genetically, these wolves are crossed with dogs. They're not a pure species anymore. They're a hybrid. And the impact they're having environmentally is big because evolution didn't happen with this exact species. They're a new hybrid. And so the population of even the wildlife is being affected by these wolves because we haven't reached that balance yet. But the killer part of the wolf is they stress animals. It's like having, it's like if you had a murderer walk through a kindergarten playground, well, the mothers are all going to be scared, right? And they're going to be concerned. And it's the same thing with our cow herds. If there's babies and mothers there and wolves are in the area, those cattle are on high alert. If they're on high alert, they're not grazing. They're not eating, they're not gaining weight. And that's the issue. You see more health problems with your animals. You see the stress. Body condition scores go down, which means they're not as fat, they're not as happy as they normally would be, they're not content, and they're not productive. And that's the biggest impact. And it's hard to empirically show that, right? But we probably have a 15 to 20% decrease in production just with the presence of the wolf in our herds.
That's shocking.
It's crazy. But it's a matter of fact, the elk herds or the deer herds, they can semi-migrate out of the area. The cattle herds are confined within a pasture, and they can't migrate. They can get in the corner and fight them off, but it's still an impact.
So far you discussed how the government is using conservation easements, how they're using the Endangered Species Act. What about the water? How are they using the water to control?
So water, and it's very interesting, and we have one fight that's continuing to go through. We have Senator Martin Heinrich, our own New Mexico senator. They have the proposed wild and scenic river for the Gila River, a big chunk of it. But mainly what's that's doing, it's kind of like the Antiquities Act. They're not picking the smallest footprint possible to protect. They're trying to protect the entire river, but there's agriculture irrigation systems along that river. There's cattle grazing. There's all kinds of things. There's actually homes and recreation going on along that river that'll all be affected by that designation. And that Gila River, in the place that they're calling wild and scenic, it's going to let that agriculture water, 700,000 acre feet of agriculture water, roll off into the next state. And then we're not going to have access to it. And in a state like New Mexico, that's a huge impact for our future. Not just the present, but the future.
So if that designation goes into effect and you are someone right there on the periphery of the river, you're using it for either recreation or for your own business, what happens on the day it gets that designation?
Suddenly there's protections that are involved, just like the Endangered Species Act. They're suddenly that you're going to have to protect the shorelines of that river, meaning that you can't let your cattle go graze right up to the river's edge. And actually I can show you that cattle grazing really helps the river's edge because it promotes the grass growth instead of erosion so all those things, every bit of water has to be accounted for on what it's being used for. And so when we get to that point, it just, the regulations get to be a red tape and a management nightmare as much as anything. And, why? The river is still wild and scenic just the way it is, but people get to live along it. We still get to use it. We get to recreate on it. And with that designation, you're just adding limits. That's all it does.
Do you feel like some of these policies, or maybe all the policies, are sort of like intellectual policies from people who went to college and they have this idea of how the world should be, and so they implement this river should be protected and scenic, but then you're living there and you're like, it's great already, we're using it,
Right.
it's like this like a top-down sort of an intellectualist approach like they did in the Soviet Union.
And that's it. And largely, and then of course, we have a huge amount of our government officials that have no practical knowledge of agriculture. And so they're 2-3 generations removed from even their grandparents raising a garden or something like that. And so they don't understand the burdens these ideas can take, or the limits they'll set on an industry or a family, or the growth of a family, and or the tax base of a small community, and which we have. And it's unfortunate, but to be honest, as president of the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association, that's a big part of my job, is to help legislators understand the cattle person's perspective and how their policies will affect us. And to be honest, I help with legislation just as much as I fight against legislation. And it's the same way with policies. I have just as many meetings with the Forest Service trying to promote good management of the forest reserves as I do fighting policy that the Forest Service is using out of their handbook. And so it's a give and take, but that's part of our federal government. That's a great thing about part of our federal government, is that we can be involved if we will.
Now, if you'd like to dig deeper into Agenda 2030, its specific manifestations, as well as how it appears to really be putting farmers and ranchers around the whole world out of business, well, you're in luck, because my team and I spent the better part of last year researching, traveling the globe, and putting together a phenomenal research package in the form of a documentary called No Farmers, No Food. Here's a trailer. Food prices are skyrocketing around the world, and if you listen to world leaders, they'll tell you it's due to climate change.
Climate change is the biggest threat for the human beings.
And their solution might surprise you.
There are 1,900 edible insect species on the planet.
The European Commission has officially declared mealworms to be food.
Yes, this is future of food.
The people in charge have determined that by switching our diet to crickets, ants, and mealworms, we'll be able to stop temperatures from rising, lower the price of food, and possibly to even save the planet.
It's never about innovation, it's always about getting rid of farmers.
Agenda 21 was meant to be the agenda for the 21st century. Some of the goals sound nice. Ending hunger. Who could possibly be against ending hunger? It requires total power from the state.
I think it's a scam. A lot of this came about in the early 70s, the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, which were good things, but it's been abused from what the original intent is.
No, maybe not
there's
this
not
one.
a farm anymore. No, there's also not a farm anymore.
So all these people shut down because of the government policies?
Yeah.
I'm the 6th generation of farmer.
Yeah, I'm the 4th generation.
How many years have they owned this plot of land?
40 years.
I think we're the last generation.
They're shutting down the small and middle-sized family-run farms.
We either own property or we are property.
I don't think we can trust the government anymore because they want the land.
And our founding fathers understood that the land would be distributed among the people so they could always control their government.
Right now, things have tripled as far as costs. I think you're going to see across the board higher food prices.
Has anybody been held accountable for screwing up? No.
As every communist tyrant of the last 100 years has understood, if you control the food, you control the people.
Everything is falling apart. There is a shortage of food.
We're heading for a world food crisis, as we hear all the time.
Do you see any hope for the situation?
Yeah, we have to continue fighting for it. No farmers, no food. They will know it.
If you'd like to check out that awesome documentary, as well as a plethora of other great content, you can find it all over on Epoch TV, our awesome no-censorship video platform. I'll throw a link to it. It'll be right there at the very top of the description box below. You can just click on that link and head on over to Epoch TV and watch the documentary right away. I hope you check it out. It took us a long time to put together, and we really dug deep and tried to, well, I believe successfully expose this agenda, how it manifests around the world, why it's getting accepted broadly by the population, as well as what can actually be done to counter it. And so again, that link is right there at the top of the description box below. I hope you check it out. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, most importantly, stay free.